Hi, welcome to the podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start our conversation on Unit 8 Education and Socialization. And topic of our conversation is caste, socialization and education. Much of the literature on caste and race, like gender, in education focuses in various ways on underachievement or the underrepresentation of particular groups. In critical areas of school curriculum, it is important to examine the main trends in the educational performance of ethnic minority pupils compared with the indigenous people in both primary and secondary schools, and in turn their access to higher education. Much of the evidence on primary education comes from surveys conducted by Alan Little and his associates in the Inner London Education Authority in 1960s. These studies compare the performance of white and black children at the end of their primary schooling. Little found that children of new Commonwealth immigrants had a reading age that was 1 year higher than their counterparts in domestic land. Caste as a descriptive criteria of social stratification is a feature which is predominant in the Indian society. Although some parallels can be drawn with race with regard to the overall process of discrimination and deprivation, no one-to-one correspondence can be sought between the two. The relationship between caste and education is complex. In the Indian society during the ancient times, there were organized institutions of formal education both in the fields of esoteric scared knowledge and exoteric secular knowledge. Education was elite based and revolved around the canons of philosophy and religious thought that were easily accessible to the people of upper castes. Knowledge was treated to be perennial, sacred, and charismatic, and education was considered to be a process of self purification and self fulfillment. Some forms of knowledge were highly practical. For example, sciences of medicine, architecture, erotics, dramatics, etc. Yet the process of education was intimately integrated with the hierarchical concept of caste, varna, and of human nature. In a general sense, knowledge was considered to be the prerogative of twice born. Thus, in the Hindu elite tradition, education as a process was selective and closed to most of the sections of society. The teacher has complete autonomy over the pupil. His authority emanated from the religious principles of life rather than secular. According to Singh, religion, caste, and the extended family in India had been the chief socio-cultural institutions which kept the traditional process of socialization and education going. Hence, the literati served as the ideals of the highest learning, social status, and honor. They were also the traditional, not only empirical power elite, but the possibilities of the attending members of this group were not only empirical closed due to the wide gap of socio-economic status, etc., but also closed by the norms of culture and religion. Hierarchy, hereditary specialization, and intercaste relations of affinity and distance were the chief characteristics of caste. The socialization of the Hindu child in the peasant society right from the beginning was a process of internalization of the laws, legends, and the stereotyped norms of culture supporting the hierarchical social structure and the institutionalized inequality of the caste system. Within this pattern of culture, each caste perhaps developed separate cultural themes, which entered into the process of socialization and formal education. These themes were, however, linked with the hereditary occupation of the caste. In the socialization of a Rajput child, for instance, emphasis was laid on personal dignity, a high sense of honor, courage, and aggression. At the same time, among high caste Hindus, an extremely authoritarian and reserved attitude toward the children, leading to high dependency characteristics, has been found by the psychologists. Although similar studies about child rearing practices and dominant psycho-cultural themes for the lower and the intermediate caste are not available, it is legitimate to hypothesize that the differential background of social status and power and occupational values prevailing among these caste groups had developed corresponding dominant orientations towards self-image and values of authority in each hierarchy of caste. These differences emanated entirely from the cultural, occupational, and economic background in which these caste groups existed and saved their children. Among the twice born caste tradition laid down a period for adolescents to study with the Guru, which in practice had a ritualistic significance, or maybe it was operative in the hoary past. For the lower intermediate caste in India, the family was the chief seat not only of socialization but also of formal education. Learning of roles was hereditary, and the household being also the place of work. All arts, skills, and crafts were learned under the patronage of the elder kinsmen. Age and ascribed status thus had a tremendous structural significance in the process of socialization as under formal education. In contemporary times, significant changes have taken place as far as access to educational institutions or aspirations for different occupations is concerned. But there are studies which reveal how students from a particular depressed caste or tribal background suffer in schools, as there are hidden or latent biases in the way the teachers teach and interact with them. Textbooks are written either avoiding or distorting their experiences and worldview and the way the school is organized. Now let us conclude the unit. After reading this unit, we have come to realize that the education is permeated by influences from family and community. It is highly susceptible to pressures from the dominant social group in society. Education thus preserves and often increases social biases present in society. Different socialization experiences of students have significant implications on the kind of personalities or self which children develop. the attitudes, skill, and knowledge they acquire, which in turn affect their achievement level in school. There are certain factors in their socialization which are conducive to learning in school, whereas there are others which place the student at disadvantage. School and inhabit learning. To belong to a particular type of family, social class, caste, or gender group and be exposed to certain types of child rearing practices have specific implications for the kind of person we develop into and subsequent development of skills, attitude, knowledge, and linguistic form, which in turn affects our performance in school. It would be naive, therefore, to assume that the school functions in isolation of one's family background. Home and school both constantly interact with each other to determine a student's overall personality, knowledge level, attitude, and the educational performance. So, even though the school may appear to be a fair and neutral institution, it works in consonance with the existing differences among people, not just maintaining but it at times enhancing these differences to the disadvantage of the marginalized groups. Here we wind up this conversation and we have reached to the end of the unit. Thank you so much for choosing this podcast.